Hello pre-prep. Well, this afternoon we're going to do a little bit of science and we're going to be exploring things that float and sink. So if something floats, it means it sits on top of the water, and if it sinks, it means when you put it into the water, it goes to the bottom. Now there's a scientific reason behind all of that, and it's what the object or the thing you're trying to float or sink is made up of. Everything's made up of molecules. They're tiny, we can't see those. But if they're squashed together and making the object really dense, it means it's going to float. And if it's less dense, if it's going to sink. And if it's less dense, it's going to float on the top and the molecules are spaced out. So let's see what we can find out, shall we? So have a look at my bowl. Now you can do this test in a bowl like I've got, or in the sink, or in the bath even if you want, or a bucket, whatever you happen to have. And I've got some things here that I'm going to test. Now, you can test whatever you like at home, whatever you happen to have. Just make sure you check with mummy or daddy whether or not you can test it, because some things mustn't go in water. If it's got something that plugs into the wall or a battery, then you mustn't let it anywhere near the water. That's really important. So check all of your things before you test them. So let's have a little look at some of the things I've got. So I've got things that are made out of different materials and different sizes as well. I might not test all of these, we'll see how we get on. So I've got some spoons here. So I think I'll start with my spoons. I've got a wooden spoon, a metal spoon and a plastic spoon. So I wonder if you can guess what's going to happen with these different spoons. They're made out of different things. I wonder if you think they will sink, float, or do different things. So let's test, shall we? I'll start with my wooden spoon. So I'm going to pop it in my water. What's it doing? It's floating, it's sitting on the top. Do you think my metal spoon will do the same? Let's see, shall we? No, that sank to the bottom, so that won't float. What about the plastic spoon? Do you think that will float or sink? Let's test it, shall we? Well, that floats as well. So some things float and some things don't. It doesn't matter whether it's a spoon or not. It's made what it's made out of that's going to let it float or sink. So let's take those away. Now, in our story that we've been looking at today, the little boy goes to take the penguin back in a boat. So I thought that was why it was quite a nice thing to test, because boats are made out of metal, a bit like our metal spoon, but they float on the water. But it's because they're hollow. So I found something here, a bit like a boat, that is hollow. It's got a hole in the middle and it's full of air as well. And I wonder if that's going to float. What do you think? Shall we see? There it goes. It sits on the top. I can try pushing it under, but look, it bobs back up again. So my nice inflatable flamingo is going to float. Now I've got a few other things here. I've got some pieces of fruit here, so I thought we could test those as well. So I have an orange, a banana and an apple. Now Oliver thinks my banana's going to sink. I don't know. And I think my orange might sink, but I think my apple is going to float. So let's have a little look. So I'm going to put the orange in first. Oh, no, so that floats. Let's see if Oliver was right. Oh, no, the banana's floating as well. And finally, my orange. I'm pretty sure this is going to float. Oh, sorry, my apple even. Yep. And my apple, all my pieces of fruit float. Now, I did test. I was going to have a look to see whether or not if I cut my apple in half, it made a difference. What do you think? Do you think it will still float even though it's in half? Let's see, shall we? Yeah, it still floats. So there's some pieces of fruit. Now I've got a couple of other interesting things here as well. I have an egg. Now Ollie and I were trying to decide whether or not the egg would float. Oliver, did you decide? Do you think it's going to float or sink?
I have no idea.
Okay, so not very scientific thought there as well. I think it might float, but it is quite heavy. So let's see, shall we? Well, it's kind of doing a bit of both. It's not sinking right to the bottom, but it's certainly not floating on the top. But I think we'd better call that sinking. So out that one comes. And then a couple of last things. I have got a key, a very large walnut, and a pencil and a dice, my last 4 things. So what do you think? Call out. Do you think my key will float or sink? Sinks. What about my pencil? Do you think my pencil will float or sink? Oh, that one floats. It's made out of the same thing as the wooden spoon. What about my very large walnut? Do you think that will float or sink? It's quite big. That floats as well. And my last thing, my dice. Now that's quite small, so I think that's probably going to float. Oh no. Sank to the bottom. You see, you can't tell just because something is big or small if it will float or sink. Now, I have one last thing I would like to test with you. So I can get a piece of kitchen roll here to dry my hands. Now, I've got some Play-Doh here. Now, Play-Doh is great fun, and I've put a recipe, if you haven't got Play-Doh at home, for you to make some of your own Play-Doh. But I thought I'd see if that floated or sank. So what do you think? I'm going to make a nice ball of my Play-Doh. It is very light. I think this is going to float. Let's see, shall we? No, straight to the bottom. I wonder if I can be super clever with my Play-Doh. I'm just going to give it a bit of a dry, do something amazing. Let's have a little look, shall we? Now I'm going to mould my Play-Doh into a different shape. I'm going to make it a bit flatter. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of a lip at the edge so it looks a bit like a rather flat bowl. Now, do you think it's the same piece of Play-Doh? Do you think it will float or sink this time? Do we have a look? Look at that. Amazing. I've made my Play-Doh that was sinking float. There you go. So, this afternoon, your challenge is to have a go with some floating and sinking, test some things. Don't forget to check with Mummy or Daddy if you can test them first before you pop them into your water. And then maybe you could make your own boat. Now, I've got a tin foil container here, so that makes a perfect boat for floating on the top. And you can maybe make some sails. If you put a piece of Play-Doh in the bottom, you could maybe use a lolly stick and make a sail. If you haven't got, a tin foil container like that, you could maybe make it out of a piece of tin foil. So this is great because although it's noisy, again, you can scrunch it into a boat shape and mould it quite well and see if you can make your own boat like that. Okay, you can also use cardboard boxes to make boats, depending on how big your bowl is and how small your boxes are. Have some fun and let me know how you get on. See you soon. Bye bye.